This is All India Radio. In a special program, now we bring you a discussion on India and Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit 2022. The participants are Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, Anshuman Mishra, Prasar Bharati special correspondent in Beijing, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing the upcoming summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is a two-day summit happening in Uzbekistan. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be attending the summit along with other world leaders like the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Chinese leader Xi Jinping. We also see that the summit is happening in the backdrop of the Ukraine war, which has affected the world in major ways. Ambassador Sajjanhar, how much do you think what is happening in Ukraine impacts also the functioning and what we will see happening at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit?
As you said very correctly, the summit is taking place in the backdrop of the Ukraine conflict. So that definitely is going to be an element that's going to be a subject of discussion that will take place whether in the plenary of the summit or lateral meetings. I think it is definitely going to have a very significant impact. It is, in a manner of speaking, going to overshadow the discussions there. But to expect the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to come up with any sort of consensus declaration or view which might be either in support of Russia or otherwise, I think that will be asking for too much, because most of the countries in that grouping, it is not only India, but it is also many of the Central Asian countries. They have also pronounced themselves that the war should stop, that there should be paths of diplomacy and dialogue that should be pursued. We would remember that very recently when Prime Minister Modi was speaking virtually at the East Forum Summit in Vladivostok. He again had spoken about pursuing the path of diplomacy and dialogue. So maybe this is the sort of comment that could come from there. But definitely if people are expecting that there might be, since Russia is there and China and Russia are very strong partners, that there would be something that would be a declaration in support of Russia, I don't think that will be forthcoming, nor would there be any statement in support of the other side of the West. But basically something to say that the UN provisions in terms of sovereignty and integrity of countries, that should be maintained and the path of diplomacy and dialogue should be followed. We have seen that in over the last 20 years that Shanghai Cooperation Organization has been in position. Its track record has not been very impressive, and there have been conflicts that have been taking place in the vicinity like in Afghanistan, but Shanghai Cooperation Organization has not really been able to play a significant or a meaningful role. So here also I see discussions taking place, but nothing very significant emanating out of that.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, as you pointed out, we also see that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, as you said, the track record has not been that great. Do you feel that the fact that India and China, both the leaders, are going to be present at the summit, and we have the Chinese Foreign Ministry who have not confirmed any bilateral between the two leaders, but do you feel that the fact that both the leaders are there, and this is also, the summit is happening after the recent decision by India and China to pull back the troops from the PP-15 or the patrolling point 15 at Hot Springs, which seems to indicate that there might be a little thaw in the relationship. Do you think one can hope for something, or do you think the status quo and the tensions that we have seen between India and China because of China's aggression is likely to continue?
You're very right. In terms of atmospherics, there might be a little lessening as far as tension is concerned. As far as optics are concerned, in PP-15 also there has been disengagement, and both armies have certified that this disengagement has taken place and it is complete. In my view, this is purely a tactical move by China, because we know that for quite some time China has been arguing for restoration of normal relations. They have said that the boundary issue should be kept in its proper place. You would recall that when the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, he came to India in March this year, he also said that we now need to restore our relations relations in all ways, particularly in economic, investment, trade terms, etc. There should be business as usual, but India's position has been very clear and very categorical that the state of bilateral relations will be determined by the relations at the border. And unless there is full peace and tranquility, it is resolved at the border. So we see that even after PP15, we do have issues related to Demchok, we do have issues related to Depsang, where the Chinese troops, PLA, have come in and have occupied positions on the Indian side of the line of actual control. So those are issues that are being discussed. So I do not see any structured, substantive bilateral meeting taking place between the two leaders. However, on the sidelines, if there is an exchange of pleasantries, or if there's in all these summits, there are banquets, receptions, and if the host country decides to place Mr. Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi next to each other at the dinner, there could be some conversation. You would recall that both the leaders were sitting next to each other at the Bishkek SCO summit meeting that took place in 2019. If that sort of both the leaders are put together in such a way, there would be an exchange of maybe pleasantries, of views. But as I said, I do not foresee any significant or substantive breakthrough as far as bilateral ties are concerned. I think a lot more work still needs to be done before we can go back to our relations as they existed before April 2020. There has been a huge loss, a huge dent as far as trust and faith and credibility of the Chinese is concerned, as far as India is concerned. So I don't foresee that just a disengagement at PP15 is going to settle the issues, and it is, we are going to revert back to the same situation, same relations that existed at the beginning of 2020.
Anshuman, if I could come to you now, we have one important bilateral that has been confirmed, and that is that the Indian Prime Minister will be meeting the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, on Friday. And one looks at this bilateral as one, of course, this is an indication of the fact that the India-Russia ties have stood the strength of time, and it is a relationship which is solid rock. But we also see that, again, going back to the Ukraine war and what we are seeing, we also see a very close relationship between Russia and China today. So this meeting where Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be meeting the Russian president, how do you look at this meeting?
Simran, you rightly said India and Russia relations have stood the test of the time, and during all the tough times, Russia and India have supported each other. Particularly in terms of Russia and Ukraine war, if we talk about, India has always maintained a balanced position, and that has been well appreciated by both, the West led by the US as well as Russia and other countries who have tried to maintain a sort of neutral position or a balanced position. So India has always been maintaining that, and that explains why India has maintained its position, what it has been maintaining in this situation. Russia and India have a strategic ties. So, of course, in this particular moment, when there is an opportunity for world leaders to meet face-to-face in person. So, of course, this meeting assumes a lot of importance because it is happening in person after more than 2 years since COVID-19 pandemic emerged. Apart from this, there are many other issues amid this shift in geopolitics and geoeconomics, particularly in terms of energy security, in terms of connectivity through Central Asia. And, India has lots of very huge stake in the region in terms of its connectivity projects. For example, International North-South Corridor, Ashgabat Agreement, Chabahar Port, and Russia is an important part in all these projects. Apart from this, there are many India-supported development initiatives in this region, and Russia and India both are important stakeholders. So, of course, this meeting assumes a lot of importance. Apart from this, there is another angle which is of China. We know that India, Russia and China are part of a trilateral group that is called RIC. However, in past few years, there has not been any meeting taking place. But as Ambassador Sajjanhar just now mentioned, with the disengagement, there might be little improvement in the atmosphere, and this kind of engagements might be, somewhere some sort of understanding might be developed. So we still do not know whether there is there would be any meeting between President Xi and Prime Minister Modi. But of course, when leaders meet in person at a venue, then things are a little different.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, if we turn our attention to Pakistan now, and we also see that at the SCO summit, the Pakistan Prime Minister will be there. And the India-Pakistan, the trust deficit today is so great that one is not even talking about the fact that there might be a bilateral, which we usually do. And we also see that the cross-border terrorism, which Pakistan has sponsored over the years, has also been there. It continues to be there. How do you think is the presence of the Pakistan Prime Minister at the SCO summit important? And do you feel that this maybe offers India and Pakistan a chance to talk, despite the fact that, of course, there is this huge trust deficit which is not going to go away very quickly?
A number of questions you have raised, Simran, and let me try to respond to those serially. First, when you say whether there's a possibility of a meeting between the two leaders, I think, of course, it depends on the two leaders, what they are going to do, what the dynamics are going to be at the summit. But as I can see at the moment, I don't think there is any possibility whatsoever of Prime Minister Modi agreeing to meet Mr. Shehbaz Sharif. Because basically it is known that Shehbaz Sharif, he has his back to the wall. He is cornered there, both domestically as well as globally and also in economic terms. Economy is suffering. We have seen the floods. We have seen what Imran Khan is doing. So the position Mr. Shehbaz Sharif might not last more than a few months, and at the most end of next year or something. So he has a very limited tenure. He does not have that freedom of action to be able to make any significant moves, because if he were to take any positive move towards India, if he would immediately be targeted by Imran Khan that these are friends of India and friends of Washington DC, etc., who have displaced him from his chair. So I don't think that India, we have not been talking to them since 2019, when we had the Pulwama attack, and after that Balakot. You are right when you say that as far as the avowed policy of cross-border terrorism has not gone away. But since 25th of February last year, when we had the ceasefire, so after that, the instances of direct crossfire have to an extent diminished. Of course, we have seen supplies of drugs and weapon and armaments through drones. But at least in terms of skirmishes and in terms of crossfire exchanges, that has come down. Now, as far as Pakistan is concerned, I think it's only a side story as far as the SU is concerned. Pakistan does not really have any major significant role to play in terms of its relations with the major powers. Of course, with China, it has the China-Pakistan economic corridor, but it is really used as proxy by China. So it doesn't really carry all that much weight. I think Mr. Shehbaz Sharif is going there basically to try and send out a message to his domestic constituency as well as globally that he is in a forum where he is rubbing shoulders with the major powers of the region. That is Russia, that is China, that is Iran, and of course India is also going to be there. Otherwise, its relations with Central Asian countries are nothing much to speak about. Of course, recently we have seen discussions taking place on the Termez, Kabul, Peshawar railway link. But whether this is going to come through, how it is going to come through, I think it is anybody's guess. I know that Mr. Shaukat Mirzayev, the president of Uzbekistan, is very keen on this particular initiative, but I don't think that it has economic sustainability, economic viability as far as this project is concerned. We'll have to wait and see. Pakistan will, of course, try to say that it can play an important role as far as bringing peace and security and stability in Afghanistan is concerned, and also attracting the Central Asian countries to come and join the CPEC. But I think its role and presence will be of marginal significance at the best in the SU summit.
Mr. Sajjanhar, we also see that the SCO is a Beijing headquartered organization. It is made of China, Russia, India, Pakistan, and there are 4 Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. And it is also the world's largest regional organization. It covers approximately 60% of the area of Eurasia, 40% of the world's population, and more than 30% of global GDP. Anshuman, if we were to look at the fact that the Chinese President Xi Jinping, he will be making the state visits to Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and these are his first trips abroad since the early days of the COVID pandemic. How are these visits being looked at in the region? Because you cover the region and you are based out of there. What is the sense and how is Xi Jinping's own state visits being looked at, SCO being a part of this outreach?
We, as you said, and we know that after more than 2 years, Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, is going out of China, and Chinese side has mentioned that this particular visit to Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan for this Samarkand summit, SCO summit, is the most important diplomatic event, and they call it heads of the state diplomatic engagement. So they call it the most important diplomatic event ahead of the 20th National Party Congress of Chinese Communist Party, which will take place on 16th of October, about this month. So, of course, it assumes a lot of significance for Kazakhstan, the country which has been chosen by President Xi Jinping for his first visit abroad after 2 years. So that has a lot of symbolic as well as strategic importance. If we see 2013, in October 2013, President Xi Jinping announced his first hints at his what we now know as Belt and Road Initiative. At that time, it was One Belt, One Road Initiative. So he announced it from there, and of course, this visit signifies that he would like to, portray this particular initiative by him to at least to his domestic audience just before Party Congress, where he is going to appear in the third term in power, and to the countries in the region, the SCO region, which we know that it covers around 60% of the Eurasia and it's the largest regional organization. So of course, it all gives a very important signals to all these countries about China's importance to the region, about China's positioning in the region, and of course to the West, against whom China is trying to portray SCO as a big, organization having its geopolitical role.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, coming back to you, I wanted to ask a little about the China-Russia relationship. And we have seen a growing closeness and a growing strengthening of relationship between Russia and China, especially since the Ukraine war started. And we also saw that when Putin visited China for the Winter Olympics in early February, he and Xi unveiled a new era for the world order. They also said the friendship between China and Russia has no limits. And we will see both of these leaders present at the SCO summit. They are likely to have a bilateral. How worrying do you think is this coming closer of China and Russia? One, for India in particular, and secondly for the world.
Let me put it this way, that what we saw and what the world saw, the state of relations between Russia and China on the 4th of February, when Mr. Putin was in Beijing for the Winter Olympics. They said no limit partnership. If I were to assess the partnership as it exists today as compared to what we were looking at on the 4th of February, I think there has definitely been, I would call it a mellowing down of the relationship. That exuberance, that energy, that enthusiasm, in my view, in that relationship has come down. I will not say significantly declined, but it has definitely come down.
Anshuman, if you could also add in, since you are in the region, how do people in the region and what is the sense you get when you are there about this China-Russia relationship, especially in the backdrop of the Ukraine crisis? What is the sentiment that you feel is there on the ground?
If you talk about the sentiments here, of course, sentiments are quite pro-Russian. As Ambassador Sajjanhar mentioned, the warmth and in the relationship at the time of Beijing Olympics in February this year. Of course, that has changed a little bit because of the way the war has been prolonged and could not get to any sort of conclusion and all, and a lot of civilian casualty and all. So that, of course, is not a very pleasant sight for China in that sense. But if I can say, the recent visit by China's China's top leader, number 3 in the hierarchy, Li Jianshu, who has recently visited Russia and met Russian president, met Russian Duma leader. So there he clearly said, I mean, China has been saying this. He very clearly said that China supports Russia's core positions in terms of Ukraine, and that has been clearly interpreted by experts that China is supporting Russia in the war against Ukraine. Of course, this has been omitted by Chinese state media and Chinese foreign ministry in its transcript, but that has been released by Russian side. So this again makes it a very interesting case, like how much China is going to support Russia in this particular time, especially when we have seen the reports that the Ukrainian army has recovered a lot of stretch of lands from Russia, and Russian army has to retreat from certain parts in Kharkiv after they retreat from Kiev. So this is really going to be a major discussion point when Chinese president and Russian president are going to meet. Apart from this, there might be discussions on to increase the trade between both the countries, and also about method of payment to reduce the dependency on the dollar because of US sanctions on Russia. There might be some announcement on bilateral trade and use of ruble, the use of yuan for mutual trading and all. And of course, apart from this, there are other strategic importance in this region. For example, China's connectivity towards Europe, and of course, its few connectivity routes go via Kazakhstan to go via Russia. So all these things are definitely going to come up. Then there are issues related to the situation in Afghanistan. Then there are counter-terrorism related issues, terrorism related issues in Xinjiang. As we know that China is very much concerned about this ETIM movement. So all these things are definitely going to weigh, and probably they would make a case for China-Russia cooperation in this region.
We also see that the Ministry of External Affairs issued a statement of the SCO summit, and the statement says that during the summit, the leaders are expected to review the organization's activities over the past 2 decades and discuss the state and prospects of multilateral cooperation in the future. Topical issues of regional and global importance are also expected to be discussed at the meeting. Ambassador Sajjanhar, when you look at the SCO summit and you look at this multilateral cooperation, if you were to pick up, say, 3 focus areas, which would you point out are the areas that the SCO as a bloc should focus on so that it grows in strength as a regional organization?
I would pick up 3 issues which would be of particular salience and significance, and which need to be focused upon by the SCO summit. And as you said very rightly, this SCO summit being the first one that is being held in person after the 2019 Bishkek summit that took place, it becomes much more important. So I think the first I would identify is Afghanistan, bringing stability, security, ensuring that the terrorist groups there are not able to launch attacks against the neighbors of that country, against countries in the region, or even further away. So Afghanistan is definitely, in my view, going to be an important issue of discussion. The second, in my view, would be of connectivity. That is something that definitely India is going to raise, because we don't want that the focus should only be on the Belt and Road Initiative. There are a number of initiatives that India has taken, whether it is the INSTC, whether it is the Chabahar project, and so on and so forth. And many other countries of the region are also interested in these projects. So connectivity would be another one. And I think since India takes over the mantle of the summit, hosting the summit next year in 2023, I think there are other issues related to culture, related to people-to-people contact. When we were heading the heads of government summit a few years ago, then issues like traditional medicine, in terms of tourism, going to different countries, in terms of exchange of literature, translation of literature of these different countries. So I think people-to-people contact will also be an important issue in the discussions that take place here.
Anshuman, taking off from what Ambassador Sajjanhar has said about the people-to-people contacts and culture and the shared heritage, when you travel in these parts and you report, how much do you think does that add on to the relationship, and especially in the SCO summit, how much do you think is that a factor, the soft power that India has, the people-to-people ties and the cultural aspect of the relationship?
That is a very important aspect of a relationship among all the countries within SCO region, and SCO leadership, SCO Secretary General, and all other leaders have consistently maintained that the cultural and relations and people-to-people exchanges make a very important pillar in this relationship. India has always maintained a very deep cultural relations with the Central Asian countries and other countries in this region. It has treated the region as an extended neighborhood. And during India's upcoming presidency, there are many such events already planned, Simran. And if, as Ambassador Sajjanhar mentioned, when India hosted the heads of government meeting in November 2020, there were many initiatives by India which were the first ever initiatives. For example, SCO Startup Forum, the Young Scientist Conclave, Economic Think Tanks Consortium, Traditional Medicine, Buddhist Heritage Exhibition, Translation of Literature, and many more. And of course, all the countries will also discuss in the upcoming summit that how to move beyond in this COVID era to revive this tourism sector and of course the service industry in the region, which is another important part of the economic engagement in the region. And if I can tell you my experience in Beijing, Indian Embassy in Beijing, they started a very unique initiative which was based on the soft power of Indian cinema, which is very popular in the SCO region countries. So they started this screening of every month, which was dubbed in Russian and with the English subtitle, and all the diplomats and other people from these countries, they really loved this initiative by Indian Embassy. And this was to celebrate India's successful conduct of the SCO Council of Heads of Government meeting in 2020. This will continue till next year when India hosts the SCO summit. That's the first time India's presidency of SCO. So this is of course a very important pillar.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, you had mentioned Afghanistan as being one of the areas that you think should be a focus point when it comes to the SCO summit. We've also seen that the developments in Afghanistan of late, of the Taliban rule, we've seen reports coming out which are not very encouraging. We also see that Afghanistan is strategically important to almost every nation which is a member of SCO in terms of its own security and in terms of the regional security. How hopeful are you of the fact that the SCO summit and the SCO leaders, when they meet in the next 2 days, can come up with some kind of a joint understanding or outlook on Afghanistan and how to deal with Afghanistan as we go forward?
Simran, I think it will not be very difficult to come to an agreed document, agreed wording, formulation, what needs to be done as far as Afghanistan is concerned. I think that has been quite clear, whether it was in the Doha understanding that was signed between the Taliban and the United States, or in the UN Security Council resolution 2593 that was adopted on 30th August last year, when India was chairing the Security Council as the president. So I think all the formulations have been available with us, have been quite clear. What the challenge is basically making the Taliban establishment, the Taliban dispensation, agree to those and abide by those and implement those. And so here, when all the countries are going to be there, and I understand that a representative of the Taliban is also going to be present, then I think it will be the countries should together try to influence and put pressure on the Kabul government that this is the path to follow, because it is already more than 13 months and not a single country in the world, not only as far as SCO, the regional countries are concerned, but no other country in the world has accorded recognition. In the past, of course, we know that when Taliban had established its rule in Kabul, then UAE, Saudi Arabia, Turkmenistan, these were the countries that had had recognized, given diplomatic recognition to the country. So here also, I think there will be more pressure. Of course, the government has been saying that we are meeting all our commitments, but obviously there is a lot of difference between what they say and what they actually do. So all these countries, the members of SCO, can get together and try to put pressure on Afghanistan that if they want diplomatic recognition from the global community and from, they want funding for their development and resources, then obviously they have to take a large number of steps and measures in the right direction.
And in the next 2 days, we will follow the SCO summit, and we will also follow Prime Minister Modi's various bilateral meetings and the developments which take place in the SCO summit. With these comments, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on India and Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit 2022. The participants were Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, Anshuman Mishra, Prasar Bharati Special Correspondent in Beijing, and Simran Sodhi, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.